Hello, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and welcome back to another year of Go with the Flow presented by R.S. Andrews, where I, Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews, and the entire Dog Nation team, and many of you as well, will get a chance to make your picks against the spread for the games of the upcoming weekend. And I was trying to think before the show started, I'll say hello to Dari Payro here from R.S. Andrews. Is this year 3 or year 4 of us doing the show? I know it spanned 2 different studios, but how many years have we been doing this now, Dari?
I think it's 3.
Okay.
Right, Connor? 3?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's year 3.
So it just seems like longer than that. No, I'm kidding. It is fun to have the full Dog Nation team. That's actually a little bit of an enhancement. You know, in years past, we've had our Dog Nation team making their picks via the magic of pre-recorded video, now making their picks this season live. So even better than before. Many of you remember this show from the past, where we will look at the Georgia Bulldogs, their upcoming opponent for the week, the Clemson Tigers, both from a point spread standpoint and an expected point total standpoint. We'll also look at the big games from the rest of the SEC and the top college football games there as well. It is just a fun way to set the stage for what's going to happen. Of course, all the point spreads that you see in today's show, all made possible by our friends at BetUS. You go to betus.com, use the promo code DN125. You can get a 125% sign-up bonus there, so make sure you check out BetUS on all of that. And thankfully, we would not be able to do this show if not for our good friend Dari Payro, who not only makes pretty strong picks when it comes to the games each and every weekend, but also does really strong work and he and his team have done that for a long time when it comes to taking care of your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, your electric needs. Of course, this time of year, you're thinking about ACs a lot. And you're thinking about that hot weather that's still on its way for the month of September. Well, just know this. If your air conditioning unit's kind of at the end of its lifespan, and you know if it is, there is a really good chance that R.S. Andrews can breathe some new life into it. They can get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs, but you just need to find them online for them to be able to do that. rsandrews.com. It only costs $99. So it's great savings and a great opportunity for all that. And Dari, my guess is this time of year, you're still getting a bunch of those air conditioning phone calls because, let's face it, it is still very hot weather. And through a good portion of the upcoming football season, folks are going to be sweating a lot during the day before they come inside to watch those games in the afternoon, right?
Oh, no doubt. Still hot, still humid. Probably roll like that into September. Then it'll probably start to cool down. We'll get that nice, crisp football weather in the air.
Well, speaking of rolling into the month of September, that's exactly what Georgia wants to do in Charlotte on Saturday. Take on the Clemson Tigers. Of course, you know the story with Clemson in the college football playoff every year since 2015. Georgia looking to return to the playoff for the first time since 2017. These are two teams that have a tremendous history with each other. Obviously, the decade of the 80s, in many ways defined by the Georgia-Clemson rivalry, the Georgia National Championship in 80, the Clemson Championship in 81, then close games throughout much of the rest of the decade. Two teams have not played since 2013, 2014. Ironically, the last season opening loss for each of these two teams was at the hand of the other back during that home and home during that span. Clemson has been throughout much of the summer a narrow favorite, at one point in time as much as 4.5. We'll call it 3 as we get ready to play today. And with that in mind, let's remind you how our game works. We'll hear from each of the Dog Nation folks, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, the Dog Nation listeners and viewers will have a chance to weigh in with their thoughts in the game. I'll share my opinion on the game. And after that, a consensus is formed. And at that point in time, Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews gets to kind of fill the role that many of you will also fill as you watch the show, deciding, do you want to join the consensus, or as we say it around here, you want to go with the flow and take the pick that most of us have taken. And it always makes for a very spirited conversation. This season, no different. What a way to start with Georgia and Clemson. And Mike Griffith, with that in mind, I'll let you go first on Georgia as a 3-point underdog in Charlotte against the Tigers. What's your thought on the game?
Yeah, it's interesting, BA, with Kirby winning all of his openers, but first time he's played a ranked opponent in an opener since his first game as the Georgia head coach when they beat Clemson, North Carolina. I've kind of gone back and forth on this game in the off season, but really the last couple months and what I'm hearing in fall camp about Kendall Milton, some of the success he's had in camp. To me, that winning edge is going to be a balanced offense. And I think Georgia can run the football on Clemson better than Clemson can run the football on Georgia. So I'm going to take Georgia with the outright win. My score in that is 27-23, Georgia over Clemson.
There you go, Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, what do you think about the Dogs against Clemson?
Interesting point there from Mike. All this subterfuge and smokescreen about air raid and explosive offense, and he sees a balanced game. I see a high-scoring game. I see a game somewhere in the 30s. I actually like the fact that Georgia's getting the outright win here as well. I see a game that Georgia wins this game. I think it's by about a touchdown or 10 points. I don't see a close game like the 3-point line suggests the spread between the two teams. Give me Georgia with the outright win.
So a very bold prediction from Jeff, certainly very interesting. And maybe as expected, it's all dogs thus far from our expert panel. Connor Riley, how about for you?
I could not disagree with Jeff more. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I absolutely agree. If Georgia's going to win this game, they're going to need a big day from multiple running backs, whether that be Kendall Milton, James Cook, Kenny McIntosh, or Zamir White there. And I want to pick Georgia. The emotional side of me wants to pick Georgia, but one, I know everyone else on here is going to pick Georgia. Two, I don't exactly feel strongly enough to make it a 5-0 clean sweep or a 6-0 clean sweep. So because of that, I'm going to do the emotional hedge, pick Clemson minus the 3 points, because if Clemson wins, then I am correct. And if I'm incorrect, that probably means Georgia wins. So you take the two sides there.
Interesting idea from Connor there. DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers, as you might imagine, disagreeing with Connor. 84% take UGA. So if you want to talk about like the excitement of week one against a perennial playoff team, more than 4 and 5 of our audience think Georgia gets the win on Saturday, which is a fun thing to think. And listen, I have to be honest here. I'm probably, I certainly am the most Georgia partisan person on this broadcast, and I'm going to be rooting like heck for Georgia on Saturday. And I do believe they win, but I don't have a ton of confidence in my pick on this. I'll take Georgia, but I'll give you a couple of numbers of note here. This will be the 9th time in the Kirby Smart era that Georgia's been an underdog of a touchdown or less. In those previous 8 contests, Georgia 3-4-1 against the spread. But here's the thing that gives me pause. As just a 6-point underdog last year, Alabama ended up losing 41-24. As just a 7-point underdog in the SEC championship game in LSU in 2019, ended up losing by 27 points, 37-10 right there. Georgia has not fared particularly well as of late in the role of narrow underdog. Obviously, in this 3-point spot, you can't help but think about that. Ultimately, though, if you're wanting a positive trend to feel good about, think about this. We all know Clemson, for the most part, has had success against SEC programs, beating Alabama a couple of times and beating the likes of Auburn and home a couple of years ago, A&M there as well. But against the spread, slightly different story. Just 2 and 5 in the last 7 games against the spread against SEC competition. I'll also say this, that traditionally speaking, teams favored by 3.5 actually cover the spread more often than teams favored by just 3. It's a little bit of a contrarian idea, but the extra half point usually speaks to an extra level of confidence. Clemson has lost that extra half point edge as this game has gotten closer. So I'll rally around that, declare victory on it, and I'll take Georgia. Not a lot of bass in my voice as I do, but nonetheless, Dari, the flow here decidedly on the side of the dogs, underdog and Georgia Bulldogs. Do you want to go with the flow and take UGA?
Well, I'll get to that in a second. First, I think it's going to be just one of those classic, super intense games, like a playoff atmosphere type game. Both of these defenses are elite. I'm kind of with Mike, I think Georgia's defense is going to give Clemson a tad more trouble up front on that line, probably in the secondary as well, creating some pressures on any passing plays that they're doing. Clemson secondary is probably one of the best in the country. For Georgia in this game, I have a few concerns. One of the concerns I have is, Clemson has more experiences in these type of big games than Georgia does. Another concern I have is the depth of players. I think Clemson has a better depth and experience in their second tier of subs that come in for the game. I'll take Georgia's top 22, against their top 22 all day, but depth is definitely a concern and unknown right now with this team. And my third concern for Georgia is they have some injuries at some really key players that are just game changers, more so than Clemson does coming to this game. And for Georgia, I think the season's more important than this one game. So I think it's going to be super tight. It's going to come down to the wire. Normally, with all that, I would lean Clemson, taking them with putting money on it. However, since I'm going to this game and I'm undefeated in this stadium in a lot of football games and a lot of underdog games. I'm looking for that streak to continue, and I'm going to take Georgia to win the game late and shock the world.
I like
Go
the idea of
Dogs.
that. I love the Go Dogs there at the end. Darn it, we should point out you'll be with us for DawgNation Invasion. It's going to be a great party all day long. And boy, I hope your prediction ends up being right there as well.
Yeah, well, I'm going with the gut. Going with the
like
history. I am undefeated in that stadium over a span of this will be the fourth, 90s, 2000s, 10s. This will be the fourth decade era. So I'm looking forward to continue that.
I like the idea of that. We'll turn our attention back to Georgia and Clemson before our show is done today. Also want to highlight some of the other big games in the SEC there as well, including the one in Atlanta where the Crimson Tide, the reigning national champions, although a lot to replace off last year's team, gets ready to take on Miami at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Miami obviously trying to wave the flag for the ACC, a league that hopes to have more depth this year with the Hurricanes and with the rise of UNC. The big story for the Hurricanes during the offseason has been the insertion of Manny Diaz, the former defensive coordinator, now head coach, back in that Hurricanes defense. He'll call out those defensive signals for Miami here this season. They are, though, a prodigious underdog, 18.5 points. This game over the course of the summer has moved by almost a touchdown in favor of the Crimson Tide here. So a lot of respect for Alabama, as you might imagine. Mike, let me go back to you here. With Alabama giving 18.5 in the season opener, what do you think about the Tide and the Canes?
Yeah, Miami's been a program that's been struggling to get back to where they were. I don't see it happening. Alabama's a team chomping at the bit to prove who and what they are in the opener. I like Alabama in this game, and I like them to beat Miami handily. I'm going to say Alabama 45, Miami 14. I just feel like the RPOs and Bryce Young, this is something Miami really hasn't had a chance to scout, and I just don't have a lot of respect for the ACC.
Jeff, how about for you when it comes to Miami and Alabama?
First of all, Mike, that's another short take for you. It feels like you and I are quick game with our takes, and everybody else is coming with dissertations and facts and point spreads and Pythagorean theorems and everything else to go along with this. I'm going to keep this another one pretty simple.
Too late.
We were talking about top 22s and top 11s. Brad, so funny, man. First singer of the year already, man. Top 22s, top 11s. I think Alabama's second 22 is better than Miami's first 22. I think Alabama's going to win by about 35 points. This one will not be close.
Good stuff there from Jeff Sintel. Connor Riley, how about for you?
Do you guys know that Miami's pro football team starting quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, is younger than Miami's college team starting quarterback, Derek King, who is 25? This Miami team could be something at the end of the year, but with Derek King coming off an ACL injury that he suffered in the bowl game last year, I think this Alabama team is going to want to come out and prove a lot of things. I'm sure BA's got some stats of when Alabama is a favorite between 14 and 21 points. I'm going to take Alabama here. They were great to me last year. They covered the spread a ton, obviously winning a national championship. So give me Alabama here in the 18. You could get this up to 21, and I would still take Alabama here.
DawgNation daily listeners and viewers agree. 79% take Alabama. Connor's right. Alabama's a funny team in that they obviously dominate college football, but there's kind of a Goldilocks zone where they're favored by just more than 2 touchdowns, slightly less than 3 touchdowns, where for whatever reason, they just obliterate opponents. A lot of teams don't do well when favored by 30 or more. Alabama's no different. And Alabama, if they're playing a team close enough to be, within a touchdown of the point spread, Alabama doesn't always do great there. But they just absolutely lay waste to folks when they're favored by about this number. However, for the Crimson Tide, here's the number that matters most for me. This will be the 9th consecutive year Alabama opens the season in a neutral side against a Power 5 non-conference opponent. Alabama's won all of the previous 8 by an average of 27 points. I don't know, Dari, that there's a better sure thing in not just college football than all of sports. Alabama, week 1, neutral site non-conference game. They just have this figured out. The closest game they played over that span was a 10-point win against West Virginia 8 years ago. Everything else is, or I should say 7 years ago, everything else is 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. This to me is as sure a thing as you get. If you're interested in Miami, they were 6-5 against the spread a year ago, 6-7 the year before that in 2019. So no great shakes against the number. As Connor, I think, said, they may be good by the end of the year. Alabama is just a given week one. Easy pick for me on the Crimson Tide. That puts a clean sweep on the side of Alabama. Or you want to go with the flow?
Absolutely. Going to go with flow. I love Bama. And I forgot to get my tasty beverage here.
I like that.
Kick off the season. And since we're talking about Bama, that's probably a pre-celebratory, cold beverage there, because this is a game I will go pretty heavy on. I love Bama for everything everyone is on here has said. Bill O'Brien gets his first shot as offense coordinator there, and I think he's just going to pound the rock. They may rush for 300 yards in this game.
Okay, but you got to be careful with that, though, right? Running the football lower scoring game does make it harder to cover the 18.5. You don't think so?
No, I think they're gonna score all. I think they're probably gonna throw for 350 yards too. I mean, I think they're gonna mop them up.
We should also point this out that last year you actually broke form a little bit. For those who have been watching for the last 3 years, you have almost always taken Alabama. That to you is a very safe bet. Nick Saban, top coach in college football. Last year, though, you did break form on that a little bit more late in the year, if memory serves, right?
Yeah, I mean, 2020, you can kind of chalk it up. There's a lot of, no fans, some fans, a lot going on. So, I was trying to really get a feel for a lot of the sports trends and bettings and flow of teams last year. So I was trying to zig a bit. Probably did a little too much. It cost me some time. So this year, it's all Bama every time. Book it.
Certainly good to think about there. Next game, also involving SEC competition, sees LSU going to Pasadena to play UCLA in the Rose Bowl. True road game here for the Tigers, probably coming at a good time. Obviously, our continued prayers for the folks in Louisiana who have dealt with horrible weather, something LSU, unfortunately, is no stranger to having to endure, this time of year, going back a good number of years. The fact they have the road game, getting away from all of that, probably actually comes at a good time. Also, ironically, this is the first game in Rose Bowl history where beer and wine will be served at the concession stand. Believe me when I tell you, those folks in Pasadena have no idea what they're about to get into with these LSU fans that will literally drink them dry when it comes to that. We saw UCLA in week 0 with a win against Hawaii. This will be our first chance to see LSU looking to bounce back from what was just a 5-5 season a year ago, but a fun win against Florida to close that out. UCLA here hosting the Tigers finds themselves a 4-point home underdog. Mike, what do you think about the Bruins and the Fighting Tigers here?
Yeah, I like the Bayou Bengals in this one to cover it as well. I know they're preparing in Houston, and that's not ideal, but I like this LSU team a lot. I think they're going to go far in the West Division. I think they could win the West. This is kind of my sleeper pick is for a real big bounce back year. Max Johnson, a really talented kid from the shadows of Sanford Stadium, was able to go down to the swamp and get a victory on those hallowed grounds. Some programs are afraid to play there. LSU goes in there and wins. And I'm going to take the Tigers to win big and put UCLA and Chip Kelly in their place. I've got LSU winning this game 31-20. Derek Stingley back for the Tigers.
That's a big win there as well. New defensive scheme. Seems like Stingley's a little bit more comfortable in that than maybe a year ago with Bo Pelini. Jeff Sintel, what do you think?
I got two big predictions. One, I think the Rose Bowl will be out of adult libations by the third quarter, and I think this game will be over by the third quarter. This is the year where LSU has gotten a lot of run. These are the players that they recruited after their national championship. They're going to have gargantuan guys on the offensive line, one of the new instant impact playmaking receivers in the SEC. You still like their secondary. You still like parts of their defense. Everybody remembers Mason Smith, that 5-star lineman that chose to go play for the Tigers. I think there's just too much SEC talent. Like my contemporary Mike Griffith said, there's just too much SEC talent. And I think it's going to be a party in Pasadena for those LSU faithful. I like LSU by 10 points in this game.
Connor, homestanding Bruins catching 4.
This is my stone cold lead pipe lock of the century of the week. Give me UCLA here. They have the most returning experience of any team in the Power 5. They actually have a game under their belt, winning pretty comfortably last week against Hawaii. You have LSU, who's been displaced in Houston this week, so they're practicing there all this week. They're going to fly to Pasadena on Thursday. I think that only adds to it. I think Chip Kelly has this program where he wants to have them, entering, I believe, his 4th year as the head coach there at UCLA. I'm not as quite as high on LSU and what we're going to see out of them. So because of that, give me UCLA +4 at home here, not just to cover, but to win outright.
So it's a very interesting pick by Connor. DawgNation daily listeners and viewers going SEC pride here. They take LSU 63%. Probably not a surprise. 1 point to back up what Connor had to say there. In just 7 games a year ago, remember short season of the Pac-12, UCLA did cover the spread in 5 of those. So that's an example of that. However, think about the scenario that UCLA is in on Saturday, playing a week after a win. In the 31 previous games under Chip Kelly as coach, UCLA has only followed a win with a win 4 times there. So playing consistently week to week been a little bit of a problem. Here's the one thing that I come back to with LSU. Almost any way you kind of carve it up for Ed Orgeron, this is a coach who's been pretty good against the spread. One of the reasons why I think Orgeron's a pretty good coach is because of numbers like this, that he finds a way to win in comparison to expectations. They are 5-3 against the spread on the road as a favorite of 7 points or less. 10-6-1 against the spread as a road favorite all the way around. So as a favorite on the road, tough spot to be in. It has not been hard for Ed Orgeron and LSU to put a winning record together there. I at least partially agree with Connor that I don't think it's going to be as easy as maybe Jeff and Mike described the game as being. I think UCLA is live enough of a dog to keep it close for a while, but I'd be shocked if LSU doesn't cover. I'll take the Tigers here. That puts the flow on the side of LSU. Dari, you like underdogs from time to time, especially home dogs getting points here. Are you going to join the flow, go with the flow, and take LSU?
Hell no. There's no way I'm taking a Pac-10 underdog against an SEC elite program. Never going to happen. Okay. I'm so opposite from Connor on this. I absolutely love LSU. Like, they're pricing in last year's factor of how bad they were. That was a hangover year. I mean, the 5-5 in the season. This is where LSU's defense is going to shine. They're going to be way too much for the Bruins. Derek Stingley Jr. is probably the best cornerback in the country. I think this is going to be an emotional game with the Tigers and Hurricane Ida, that they will rise up to distract the people of that area, bring them together, help deliver a win for their friends and family back in Louisiana. That's usually what happens with teams like this. Here's some other stats. In the last 11 non-conference games, LSU is 7-4 against the spread, and they're 8-2-1 against the spread in their last 11 road games. Yeah. LSU's gonna cover this. I love it. They're one of my big plays this week. Absolutely love LSU.
As Dari points out, the Orgeron numbers against the spread, SEC competition, road games, favorite, narrow favorite, pretty much however you want to thin slice that. He's pretty good against the spread. It's one of the reasons why I think he's a pretty good coach all the way around.
How about these numbers, though, BA? We're talking about guys coming back on a 3-14. They stunk last year. Why do we think they're going to be that much better 1 year later?
You talking about UCLA?
Yeah.
Well, it's still 3. I mean,
wait a minute. LSU went 5-5 last season. Why do we think they're going to be so much better? It's
because they've got a new offensive coordinator, and Max Johnson emerged as their starting quarterback after beating Florida. Some of those losses came before he was the quarterback, and they had quarterback questions as well as a lot of off-field distractions. It may actually work in their favor that they're traveling together, and as Dari said, bonding at a very emotional time for their families.
I don't.
Go ahead, Connor.
Whatever. We'll move on.
Should be a fun game for sure, and a part of a series of 6 consecutive days with football to open the upcoming season, including, folks, make sure you set your calendars for this, Monday night as well, also back here in Atlanta for Louisville against Ole Miss. Ole Miss, the favorite team by a lot of folks, a little bit of an off-season darling. They are ranked in the coaches poll to start the upcoming season, and they are a 9.5-point favorite against the Scott Satterfield coach Louisville Cardinal team that had a little bit of an off-season of disarray, with Satterfield doing anything he could to flirt with open jobs like the one at South Carolina. A little bit difficult to tell kind of how Satterfield fits into the picture there at Louisville for the moment, but it is Cardinals Rebels Monday. Ole Miss 9.5-point favorite. Mike Griffith, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, that spread got up there pretty high. Last I saw it was 7.5. You're really pushing me on this one. I'd really like to take Ole Miss. I mean, there's been more going on at Louisville since Rick Pitino owned a restaurant off the field there. So I think I'm going to have to go with Ole Miss, though. I mean, I think Lane Kiffin's a guy that likes to put points on the board. As I said earlier in the show, I feel a little bit of an SEC snob here. This is an SEC-ACC matchup. I realize it's on the road. It's probably a dangerous pick. I don't feel real good about it, but I just don't have a whole lot of conviction with Louisville. And as you said, Satterfield, there's a guy on the hot seat. Give me Ole Miss to win that game 34-21.
Now, it would not be above me to type the wrong point spread, but is Mike trying to undercut me? Y'all have 9.5 here on this one, right?
That's what I saw when you sent it.
Yeah. I think Mike's trying to undercut my.
I'm looking at a different sports book line.
Mike's trying to bargain shop on me a little bit here. But nonetheless, he takes Ole Miss there. Jeff, what do you think about the Rebels in Atlanta against Louisville?
Yeah, first of all, this is a big kind of spotlight game with them a neutral side in the bins for the Rebels. I don't think the roster there is quite up to it. I know Lane Kiffin's going to score a lot of points, but a lot of the guys that produced a lot of those points from last year, I'm thinking about Elijah Moore specifically, are not on this roster. It's an early game. I was kind of, you want to talk about undercutting and bargain shopping, I was kind of looking at this game as a touchdown game, a 6, 7, 8-point game. I think that's too many. I think this is a game that's going to go 4 quarters. I think Lane's going to be trying to stretch the field vertically the whole game, stretch the field horizontally. He'll have to lean on his special tailback to do so. If we're dropping 9.5 in the bucket for for Louisville and the Satterfields, I think I'm going to take the Satterfields in this one.
Wow. Jeff mentions Elijah Moore. Amazing how much more productive Moore was, even the second leading receiver for Ole Miss a year ago. Big loss, and actually Moore already getting some buzz in the NFL with the New York Jets there as well. Connor Raleigh, how about for you? Actually, so Jeff, you take a Louisville right there, right?
I'm taking Louisville because of those points. That 9.5 is just too much.
Connor, what do you think?
So Mike and Jeff both sort of hit on something. They feel this 9.5 line is a little too high. I probably agree with them there. That tells me that this line stinks, and there was something Vegas here is trying to tell us. Because of that, I'm going to take Ole Miss here. Obviously, I probably agree with Mike. I like this a lot more if it's 7 than, say, 9.5, but I still feel comfortable enough with what Matt Corral's going to be able to do and put up points in this game. So give me Ole Miss in the 9.5 there.
Yeah, interesting pick from Connor. DawgNation Daily Audience agrees. They take Ole Miss to the tune of 76%, so more than 3 of 4, taking the Rebels there against the Cardinals. And listen, my bias in this is well established at this point in time. I'm not anti-Lane Kiffin as a play caller. I think he's a sharp offensive mind. He's certainly an entertaining personality. But in terms of the big emerging season that Ole Miss is supposed to have, I'm just not quite so sure where the evidence of that comes from. If you want to use recent spread data as an example of that, Ole Miss last year just 4-5 against the spread. A couple of cancels, of course, late in the year, but just 4-5 against the spread. So this idea that Kiffin's exceeding expectations in his early days at Ole Miss, the point spread doesn't suggest that. By comparison, as I mentioned before, Scott Satterfield seemed to be looking to get out of Louisville, seemingly flirting with the South Carolina job, but they were better against the spread and have been better against the spread than Ole Miss. 6-5-1 against the spread in 2020. In his first year in 2019, they were 7-5 against the spread. So the tangible evidence that Ole Miss is this much better than Louisville, I just don't quite see it. It's at least worth me taking a flyer on Louisville. I'd be shocked if they won the game, but 9.5 is a big enough spread that you don't have to win. There's room to cover as a losing team here. And that's worth the flyer for me. I will take Louisville, but Dari, that puts the flow still on the side of Ole Miss. So you want to go with the flow and take the SEC repping Rebels.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the Rebels. I think they just got too much offense in this game. They still return a lot of starters from their offense. All their running backs are back. They got 3 of their wide receivers that played a lot and started last year that are returning. Matt Corral kind of really goes with, they win and cover games. If he doesn't turn the ball over, when he turns the ball over a lot, they usually lose the games. He's 7-7 as a player. But Louisville ranked 126 out of 127th last year in creating turnovers. So I don't think that's a problem in this game. I think Louisville's going to have their moments where they score, but I kind of feel like that program is more in a rebuild mode with their team than where Lane Kiffin is with the Rebels. So I think they're going to do just enough, probably win by 15, 17 points in this game.
Let's go to outside the world of the SEC for a moment. Ranked opponents, 3 top 25 matchups to start the opening weekend, including Texas hosting the Raging Cajuns, Louisiana. Longhorns making news this weekend, naming Hudson Card starting quarterback. He's played very little thus far in his Texas career. He'll get a chance to make his first start on Saturday. Also, an interesting statistical note here. This will be Texas's first season opening game against a ranked opponent, ranked versus ranked since 1984. So going way back in the past to find a top 25 matchup for Texas in week 1. They are an 8-point favorite in the debut game for Steve Sarkisian as head coach. Mike Sark, the Longhorns against the Raging Cajuns, giving 8 points. What do you think here?
Yeah, I'm really not that high on this Texas team. Boy, it's a home game, though, and I'd hate to think the officials could be influenced. Man, I really this is a toss up for me, BA. I'd only written down the SEC games here. This is a tough one because I think Louisiana is a really good team. They probably won't get many opportunities against a team like Texas. You know what? I'll take Louisiana to cover, but I'm going to take Texas to win. Give me Texas to win this game 27-20 over Louisiana.
Fair enough. Jeff, what do you think?
Okay, folks, Bijan Robinson, that's an incredible running back out of the 2020, the 2020 class, for Texas. It's Sarkisian's debut. They're at home. Longhorns, I don't know if we're going to have any sort of entertainment wagering influence there by the officials that Mr. Griffith was trying to cook over there and sell a minute ago. I just think Texas, this is a game where I think Sarkisian needs to make a statement. Folks, I remember Hudson Card from the recruiting trail, decent little quarterback, probably not as good as the quarterback that Texas A&M is going to employ this year in the SEC, but I like Texas to win this game.
Connor, what do you think?
Give me Texas here minus the 8. I think they've got a little too much talent. Louisiana does bring back the most returning production in the country from last season. I do think that matters a little bit here, but Bijan Robinson is a name to know. I think he's going to have a great game on Saturday, and I think Steve Sarkisian does just enough to get a win and a cover in his first career game as the Texas head coach.
DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers, they don't like Texas. Nobody does. 51% they take Louisiana here. I agree with some of what Mike said. I'm not high on Texas overall. In fact, I think they could be on real live upset alert coming up against Arkansas in the weeks to come. But for now, season opener for Sarkisian, debut as a coach. Sometimes you just need it. He needs it. I think he gets it. Texas covers this number. I think Louisiana's pretty good, but they probably find themselves in a tough spot on Saturday. Give me Texas minus the 8 here. Maybe a sucker play, but I'll take Texas nonetheless. That puts the flow on the side of Texas. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Texas?
Honor, you got to do it correct. You got to hook them. You got when you do it, you got to hook the horns. So I'm gonna go with the flow. I'm gonna take Texas. At first glance, you would think Texas would easily cover this game, but this is a sneaky game. The Raging Cajuns were really good last year. They've returned almost all their starters on both sides of the ball from a really good offense, a really efficient defense. I think it's going to be a dogfight with Texas. Sark needs to be careful not to fall too far behind in this game. But I'm going to take Texas just for the fact that Sark is there. He's got to win out the gates with them announcing to move to the SEC. And the fact that they're playing in Austin, I think that gives them just enough to get this done. But I think it's going to be way closer than people think in this game.
Big Ten has a couple of ranked conference matchups. We'll look at those right now, including Wisconsin hosting Penn State. The Badgers find themselves 4.5-point favorites here. Fun game for a league that did not get a chance to play a full schedule a year ago. Mike, Whiskey and Penn State, what do you think about the Badgers as 4.5-point favorites?
Yeah, not much. I think Penn State is a program that kind of on the spot this year. I think James Franklin needs to produce. I'm going to go with Penn State in an outright upset at Camp Randall Stadium. I know the stadium will be packed and they'll be doing the jump around thing, which, by the way, is one of the most overrated stadium environments in college football. So I'm going to take Penn State to win this game outright by a score of 20-16.
Keep in mind, we'll see Penn State in a big spot coming up in a couple of weeks when they host Auburn. Tough September slate for the Tigers, road games against both Penn State and LSU. Jeff, Whiskey at home, given 4.5. What do you think?
Wow, Mike dropped some Camp Randall slander all over this Go With The Flow program today. It's a great town. What's greater than the town of Madison and its many lakes? That's Graham Mertz. I think Mertz is going to be one of the top 5, top 6 quarterbacks in college football this fall. It starts and stops there with me. I know Penn State is still trying to find their guy at quarterback, shuffling in guys year in and year out. The line's 4.5. I like that song Jump Around. I like House of Pain, Mike Griffith. I look for Wisconsin to win by about 10 points in this one. Big day for Graham Mertz.
Connor, what do you think?
Both these teams had down years last season, losing seasons. I think there's more overall talent on Penn State, and I know what Jeff said about Graham Mertz, former highly touted recruit. He did not play well at all last season when he was thrown into duty there for the Badgers, with the exception of his first career start. So give me Sean Clifford, Penn State, James Franklin. with Mike, not just to cover, but to win as well on the road.
DawgNation daily listeners and viewers agree. 56% take Penn State right there. I'm going to take a flyer here on Wisconsin, though. I think Wisconsin is sneakily more talented than some folks realize. They're 15th preseason FPI. That puts them ahead of teams like LSU and USC, teams that we generally think of as having a better recruiting base to supply the roster. But Wisconsin's actually in a pretty good spot preseason FPI from that standpoint. I didn't like what I saw from Penn State a year ago. They could be better this year, but a homestanding team like Wisconsin, I think it's worth a shot there for me on that. I will take the Badgers. The flow, though, is on the side of Penn State, the underdog here. Dart, you want to go with the flow and take Penn State?
Yeah, I'm going to take the points here with Penn State. Badgers, I think, looked a little more shaky last year than Penn State did. So I'm going to need them to see them play better before I can lay money on them. So I'm just going off some of the trends here. The Badgers are 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games overall. They're 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 games as a favorite, and they're 0-4 in their last 4 conference games against the spread. When you look at Penn State's 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 games. They're 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 conference games. They're 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 games in September under Franklin, and they're 7-3 against the spread in their last 10 games as an underdog. So everything points to Penn State covering in this game.
Interesting data there from Dari, and a strong argument in the case of Penn State. Another top 25 match in the Big Ten sees Kinnick Stadium ready to rock as Iowa hosts Indiana. Hawkeyes here a 3-point favorite in this game. Of course, potential look-ahead spot with the Cy-Hawk Trophy battle coming up against Iowa State shortly after this. But for now, it's Hawkeyes hosting Hoosiers, 3-point total there. Mike, what do you think about Iowa and Indiana?
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's a great stadium, great environment, hostile crowd. They got the neat tradition where they wave to the Children's Hospital before the kickoff. That's the last nice gesture you're going to get out of Iowa fans, especially this Saturday, because Michael Penix, the quarterback that was committed to Tennessee, that Jeremy Pruitt said, you can't play here, we don't want you, has done nothing but wonderful things for the Hoosiers. And therefore, I am going to take Indiana to win this game outright. I'm invested. I believe Indiana is legit. So I'm going to take Indiana to win this game 31-24 over Iowa and the longest current tenured coach in the country, Kirk Ferentz.
Good stat there. Jeff, what do you think?
Big Kirk Ferentz fan right here. I kind of think that Iowa, if memory serves, weren't their last 2 games against Missouri and Michigan postponed last year? Like that to me looked like a top 10 team the way it was finishing the year. If they would have gotten Mizzou, if they would have gotten those 2 teams to end their season along with Michigan, I would have liked Iowa a lot. I'm going to go back to a name from the recruiting trail. This name is Tyler Goodson. He's a former North Gwinnett running back. I kid you not. I saw him strap some chains on his back and pull a Jeep up a hill. He's one of the top running backs in the Big Ten. I like Iowa's special teams. I like Kirk Ferentz, one of the dean, according to Mike Griffith, of all sitting college football head coaches. I think the line is 3. I think Iowa is going to win this game by 10 to 14 points. I like the Hawkeyes big in this one.
So split decision from our 2 scribes there. Connor Raleigh, break the tie.
I love Iowa here. And it's not like I think Indiana is going to be a good team this year. Michael Penix is coming off an ACL injury, so you worry about that a little bit. But I think this Iowa team is the best team in the state of Iowa, and I expect them to have a really big year. And I think outright win the Big Ten West and potentially give some problems to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game come the end of the year. But give me the Hawkeyes here at home, only -3. I feel like that's a little shortchanging this Iowa team.
A lot of Hawkeye love right now. The DawgNation daily listeners and viewers join in it there as well. You see 67% take Iowa to cover the 3, 2-1 margin there on that. I'm going to join in this discussion there as well, and I'll keep my comments brief here in that it's strange to think that Indiana's the sexier team in this game because, as Mike mentioned, people know Michael Penix because of the performance he had specifically against Penn State last year. Also, the starting running back for Indiana, Stephen Carr, a former 5-star USC transfer. So there's some big names to the skill positions. But Jeff touched on this. This is very important. And as a gambler, you got to watch this year. There are a lot of teams that people didn't see much last year that they don't realize they were actually pretty good. Iowa lost their first 2 games last year, had their final 2 games canceled, but in between that, won all 6 of their other games. and quietly did so in pretty impressive fashion. I also think Connor's right. I think Iowa wins the Cyhawk battle coming up against Iowa State, and I think this may be one of the easier covers on the board on Saturday. People know Indiana. I believe they find out about Iowa. I'll take the Hawkeyes, and Dari, that puts the flow on the side of Iowa here. You want to join the flow? Go with the flow.
Well, Iowa's a good team. They're going to be solid again this year. They're great at home. They don't lose a lot of games at home. They're going to be really good run the ball. They're going to play great defense. But Penix is a star. Like, he's a playmaker. So I'm going to put my money with the playmaker in this game. And I'm with Mike. I take Hoosiers on the money line to win this game outright.
Certainly should be a pretty good game, and credit to the Big Ten for starting with week 1 top 25 matchups. That's a pretty fun thing to keep in mind.
Man. Like this, BA, Indiana played Ohio State 42-35. They played Ohio State closer than Clemson did, and some people are quaking in their shoes over the Tigers. Put that into perspective.
That's certainly true. Tom Allen's squad, impressive, showing a season ago in that game, and obviously a lot of folks excited about them for the upcoming year there as well. They bring back a lot on defense. That is certainly fair to point out. Speaking of Clemson, let's finish back on the game, Georgia-Clemson for Saturday. We gave our thoughts on the point spread a little earlier. How about the over-under set at 51.5, according to our friends at BetUS, and a line that we'll look at here. Mike, over under the 51.5 for you in this game?
Well, I think Jordan Davis could pull a tank with a rope. So I'm going to take Georgia to hold Clemson's offense down with that number one run defense in the nation 2 years in a row against the Clemson offense that ranked 11th in the ACC, which means you ain't trying if you're 11th in the ACC in any football category. And that was with a first-round running back and the number one overall quarterback in the draft as a threat to pass. Why in the world do I think that Clemson can attain balance against Georgia when they weren't able to do that against the Ohio State, a team that Michael Penix in Indiana put 35 points on in the Big Horseshoe? So I'm going with the under. I, like most of you, when I first saw this matchup, my first thought was fireworks and points galore. But as I look at how these teams have struggled on their offensive line, Georgia's certainly not world beaters against Cincinnati. I think both teams are going to be cognizant of keeping their quarterback upright. That means quick throws, controlled passing game, field position football. I'm taking the under with that 27-23 Georgia win, 50 points.
Jeff, what do you think?
I see a lot of short fields. I see special teams and defensive touchdowns in this game. And I've heard mostly everyone on this panel, everybody on the DawgNation forum, everybody on social media say that you can't win a game between two championship teams anymore without points by the dozens, points by the oodles and oodles and oodles of points. I'm going over in this game.
Connor, what do you think?
Love the under here. Two strengths are Georgia's defensive line and Clemson's defensive line. Biggest weaknesses are Georgia's offensive line and Clemson's offensive line. I think because of that, it's going to be difficult for either team to get a lot of points here. I think both these teams are sound in special teams. And because of that, maybe that decreases the factor that they might play in this game potentially. So because of that, give me here the under. You do worry about defensive touchdowns, but you can't really predict those. So I will gladly take the under here.
DawgNation daily listeners and viewers agree, knowing that Georgia's been a little bit of an under team in the past. They take the under right here. I can't go along with it, though. Clemson's only lost 7 times since 2015, but in those 7 games, the winning team averaged 40 points per game in those contests. I think Georgia scores 40 on Saturday, even if it wins, but I think it likely has to score 30. That's just what it's taken. You look at the success the Clemson's had against SEC foes. They've lost 3 times to SEC competition in the playoff era, but the wins they've gotten, the SEC teams that have only managed to score on average 21 points per game there. If you don't score against Clemson, you're likely not beating them. When you can find 40, including Notre Dame in the regular season a year ago, you have a tendency to get that win. So I'll set the level a little lower. I'll say it takes 30, but I don't think Georgia wins without 30 points. That means for me as a fan, I'm cheering for the over, and so therefore I'll take the over. Dari, flow, though, on the side of the under. You want to go with the flow and take the under?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the flow. I'm taking the under. I actually like it. I just think the game, like the defenses are just so good on both sides of the ball here. I think Georgia is going to try to pound the rock. especially with all the injuries that are out there, knowing that you don't have some of those playmakers, even though Georgia has a lot of weapons. I think they're really going to try to leverage, Cook, Zeus, Milton. I think they're just going to try to pound it. And I think they're going to do a better job than that. I think Kirby's going to try to control the game clock, try to control the position, just like they did when Notre Dame came to Georgia. I think it's going to be a game flow like that. I think both of these coaches know that, a tight game, competitive game, whoever the loser is, doesn't really hurt you in this game. The only downside is if someone really gets blown out in this game, it'll come back to haunt you at the end of the season. So I think how they approach the game and the strategies of the game is really going to be feeling a lot of people out, especially early on in this game. I think that favors Georgia, that style of game.
Great stuff, Dari. I can't wait to see you as a part of DawgNation Invasion coming up on the weekend, being in Charlotte, enjoying the tailgate, enjoying the game. It should be a ton of fun. Thank you for your thoughts on these games. Certainly very interesting picks, and I can't wait to see how this first week of picks plays out as well.
Yeah, definitely. First few weeks of season's always tough. You gotta feel out, get the identities of some of these teams. But definitely looking forward to this weekend. Go Dogs! Let's get a win right out the gates.
And on behalf of all of my DawgNation teammates, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, all of whom have really, really good content on the way in the days to come as we get ready for kickoff against Clemson on Saturday night. I'll say thanks for being here with Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Of course, don't forget, make sure you check out R.S. Andrews for all your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, your electric needs. You can have them show up. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. That's the kind of service they've been providing. Story after story, they'll deliver smiles, and they will deliver a smile for you there as well. So make sure you find them online, rsandrews.com, and they'll take care of you for whatever needs you have that might prevent you from enjoying the college football weekend. Let us, R.S. Andrews, get you straightened back out there, and they'll take good care of you on all of that. rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. We will see you next weekend here for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Hope all of you have a great weekend of watching the games, and we'll talk to you back here again next time.